Welcome to Soul Soldier Speaks, where we honor the warrior within each of us on life's battlefield. I'm your host, Lindsay Taylor. Here we stand with those on the front lines of their own lives, those battling suicidal thoughts, addiction, grief, and life's hardest challenges. We honor the loved ones standing beside those struggling and remember those we've lost. Each episode, we delve into raw, unfiltered conversations and stories of people who faced the darkest of nights and emerged with healing, transformation, and hope. Together, we will navigate the battlefield, focusing on the battles that save and restore. This podcast is more than stories. It's a rallying cry, an army of soul soldiers reclaiming the light one story at a time. Together, we rise. Hello and welcome back. Today's episode is one that is deeply personal and super, super important. Erin, I am just so honored to be sitting with you. Erin, like me, knows the devastating impacts that fentanyl can have. She lost her son to a fentanyl overdose. And there's so many of us that have faced this battle, and I've connected with so many moms, and it's just crazy, Erin, how our stories have so closely mirrored one another. That's what I think really drew us together and connected us. And so thank you for being here.
No, thank you.
So I want to read a little bit about you. Okay. Erin Rockwell, is that how you say your last name? Rockwell. Erin Rockwell is the co-founder of the Logan Foundation, a devoted Christian mother who tragically lost her 19-year-old son, Logan, to fentanyl poisoning on Valentine's Day 2021. She has been married to her husband, Rick, for 26 years, and they reside in Pewaukee, Wisconsin. They have a surviving son, Caden, who is 22 years old and will be graduating from college pretty soon here in Phoenix, Arizona, this spring, 2025. Erin is an experienced licensed clinical social worker, counseling families, individuals, teens, and young adults. Her unique combination and professional experience with her personal experience of the devastating impacts of fentanyl poisoning creates a powerful and compelling narrative about the dangers of fentanyl. Erin's story emphasizes how just one pill can kill, highlighting the urgent need for awareness and education on this critical issue. Through the Logan Foundation, Erin works tirelessly to raise awareness about the dangers of fentanyl in a positive and impactful way. The foundation is dedicated to educating communities, supporting affected families, and advocating for stronger measures to prevent fentanyl-related tragedies. Erin's efforts have inspired many to join the cause, creating a strong supportive network committed to making a difference. Erin's faith has been a cornerstone of her strength and resilience throughout her journey. God has guided her through the darkest times as she continues her work with the foundation, turning her pain into purpose. Her story is a testament to the power of faith, love, and determination in facing the unimaginable, the loss of a child. This one hits me so deeply. Yeah. Today, Erin and I are going to sit down and just have a raw and honest talk about the advocacy efforts that you're doing, grief, and ultimately use our voices to help other families not to have to face or know this type of pain. Yeah. So thank you. I really appreciate you being here. Let's start with who Logan was. So I want to know his personality, his dreams, and what made him so special. What do you want people to know about Logan?
It's interesting because so many people that I talk to have a very similar response to this. So he was that kid that would walk into a room and just light it up, take up a lot of space in a room. He had a great sense of humor. People were just drawn to him. Not so much when he was younger, but I think when he was older, he became more charismatic. So he was just that kind kid. When he was younger, he was that kid who would come home from school and befriend the special needs kids. And he was just so soft and so caring. And I do find when I talk to other parents, and I know a little bit about Alex's story as well, so many of these kids who struggle have stress and anxiety and depression. It hits them deeper because they're soft. And that kindness is just deep inside them. That's a big part of him. But he loved to play baseball. He loved his little brother. They were just 14 months apart, so they were very close in age. Not planned, of course. But so they played baseball on and off from, I would say, age 4 or 5, all the way up through part of high school. He did the transparent part of our story, of course, I really love to share, is that he was definitely bullied when he was younger. And I think so many kids struggle with this with social media pressures and so much out there now with what I see in my practice. But he definitely, I always like to share how his earlier years shaped so much of what he ended up struggling with, which definitely was just dealing with not fitting in, not feeling loved by kids outside of his home. And so he definitely wrestled with that. Loved cats. We'd have cats, and that was a very good stress reliever for him. He was very aware that he struggled with anxiety as he started to get into the younger teen years. It was definitely an open thing in our home, being a therapist. We got him help very early with proactively, like just he's struggling. He went through a few deaths around fourth grade, right in a row, stacked, pretty significant deaths. And I do believe that helped or hindered him and moved along his depression a little bit as well. He became closed off at that point. So I was trying to work with both boys after losing my grandma, who was like a parent to both of them. And so that became a very big turning point for Logan in fourth, fifth grade, to a point where he struggled so much in school that we ended up moving our home to try to give him and Caden a new fresh start at a different school. Unfortunately, the change didn't change anything really, other than he just continued to struggle with different kids. That's a little bit about his background. I don't know how much to go into it, but that's who he was. He later on through his life, being only 19 when he passed, he became more distant. So we didn't have a lot of great memories from the prior 2 years. We were definitely rebuilding. To remember too was COVID.
Yeah.
So these kids were isolated.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I just have full body chills right now. We lost Alex about 4 months after. It was May of 2021. Yep. And it's interesting. You lost Logan on Valentine's Day, 2021. We lost Alex on Mother's Day of 2021. And it's almost like those holidays will never be the same again. Like Valentine's Day will always be a piece of it. Yeah. And Mother's Day, even if it doesn't fall on May 9th for us, it's always a memory. And so, and just same thing, like the last year of Alex's life was strained. And so it was hard. We were working on that relationship just due to some of the struggles that he was facing and path he was going down. And so, man, I really relate to that. And just also that sensitivity piece. Like, I think like who Logan was, like what you're saying at his core was just a really sensitive, sweet heart. Like, and that's amazing. That's amazing. And also I think when we don't know what to do with that sometimes and those emotions, it can create those struggles. And Alex definitely faced that too. But what a beautiful soul he sounded like, right? Yeah. And so I want to go to, you talked about the last text that you got from him. I saw on your social media. You shared that it was 4 years ago on Valentine's Day that you received your last text from Logan. Can you walk us through that day and what happened?
It was actually the day before, I believe, we received the text. It was on a Saturday because he started the text with, "Hey guys, happy Saturday." He had just started a job, he was a freshman at the university in Milwaukee. And so he said, "Hey guys, happy Saturday. Just wanted to say I love you and hope you have a great day." And he would do this a lot. We texted, even though the relationship strained, we also knew that the love was there. So it was that battle, that conflict, right? So we both replied to the text and just wished him a happy Valentine's Day, happy Saturday back, and that we loved him. And that was around 10:30 on Saturday morning, the day before Valentine's Day. I believe Valentine's Day was on Sunday. We just went about our day. Of course, now looking back, I have all those would have, should have, could haves, which you have to nix those at some point because we didn't know, right? I always would get the boys gifts and stuff. So I had gone out to the store and was getting his Valentine stuff to prepare for whenever I would see him in the next few days or whatever. And fast forward to Sunday, Valentine's morning, had a normal day. We went to church, came back, and it was 8:37 p.m. at night, and we received a phone call. My phone started ringing. It was his best friend, which was odd. Definitely something I knew immediately wrong. Alex's number came up on my screen. So I answered the phone, and he was frantic, just saying for me to call down to the police department at the university. And I just kept saying, "What's wrong?" And he didn't expand. My husband, Rick, he immediately got on the phone. Sorry, it's like relived. Yeah. And couldn't get a hold of anybody down there. So we jumped in we called our son Caden home. so that we could all be together. And the three of us just hopped in the car and drove down to the university, about 25 minutes from our home. As we were in the car, I just had this gut feeling like he was gone. As a mom, I think I don't know, you just have this gut feeling. It was very weird. And I think Rick was more on that side of thinking maybe he'd be in the hospital, or his mind was going in a different direction than mine was. Unfortunately, my phone rang again on our way down, and it was one of my friends who I had not reached out to that night. So she had known obviously something, because she was calling me and she's, what's going on? And I said, how do you know? What do you mean, what's going on? And she said, it's all over social media that Logan overdosed. And I was like what? Just again, that like shock. And her sister were on social media reading some of the posts. It didn't say whether he was gone or not. And so again, I think Rick hung on to that hope. And then my friend was trying to frantically call the police department. Long story short, we didn't get anybody to say anything until we got down there. And it was winter, so it was cold. And so Rick dropped Caden and I off at the door, and it was like ghost town. It was like there was nothing around. I think some people hear this story and they picture maybe there were ambulances, and I think maybe that had happened. But we were there later than when all that had happened. So we walked into the police department, and Rick was parking the car, and I had to ring a bell to get somebody, and Caden just started shaking, seizure-like shaking. So I was just holding on to him, saying it's going to be okay. We didn't know anything yet. I think I knew. I think he did too. And when Rick came in and the police came to the door, they brought us in a room and told us that they just found Logan about an hour prior, and he was in his bed, just sleeping, but he was gone. And they anticipated that it was probably a 12-hour lapse of time that no one had said anything or called. His friend broke open the door because the door had been locked. And as we go back and talk to some of the kids and get the story, and of course now it's been 4 years, and piece together things as best we can, we know from the police and the police report that his girlfriend at the time, who was just 2 months girlfriend, so we didn't even know her. We knew of her, but we did not know her. She had gone out of town for Valentine's Day, and that upset Logan. And again, going back to that sensitive kid, anyone who knows Logan knows that would upset him. He would be very sad. He had been hurt by several girls prior to this situation. And so he was not happy, and they were fighting on FaceTime. So at 7:30, go back now, 7:30 morning prior to all of this, they were on FaceTime from 2:30 a.m. to 7:30 a.m. So they hung the phone up at 7:30 a.m. Valentine's morning. So again, about 13 hours prior to when we found out, or when he was found. And the gist of that story is that they were arguing. He was upset. There had been some Snapchat messages with some guys flipping Logan off in the background. Her out of town. He's all stressed. It's Valentine's Day. She should be with him. I can just imagine what Logan might have been going through at that point. Just really sad. We did have a conversation with her the day after he passed, and she told us that he was very upset with her. They were not at a good place. His stomach hurt. She had told her he did not feel well, which is a common thing that I hear from other people. To add to that list of signs of an overdose or a poisoning, it's often people say they're not feeling well, which isn't always recognized or spoken about. But we add that in when we advocate. And he ended up taking a pill right in front of her, actually, on FaceTime before she hung up. And Logan started to make some gurgling sounds and some snoring sounds. And so she thought that he was sleeping, and so she just hung up. And we now know that was him dying. So that's why they know the time of death based on her ability to describe what was happening to him at that point. But again, she didn't know, and so she just hung up. So that brings us to where we are. That's how we found out. I think I was in a state of shock and trying to hold it together, probably subconsciously, because I was dealing with a child who was my son sitting there, just like in shock.
Mm.
We had to make a decision whether we wanted to go up to see him in his room or the next day at the morgue. And we decided it was either going to be all three of us go or all three of us stay back. And so we decided to go up to his room. So the police department was just on the bottom floor of his dorm building. And I mention that because I think that's a really important piece of the advocacy that we started. Logan lived on the 11th floor. The police department was on the first floor.
Wow.
If the signs would have been noticed, if kids understand what these signs look like, a simple phone call. So when we talk to kids at schools or wherever, we tell the story and how important it is to understand and know the signs. And to have Narcan available, of course, which we've worked very hard at getting that on all the campuses in Wisconsin. So that's how we found out. And obviously, it's never the same.
No. Oh my goodness. I didn't even know that part of your story too, that the police department was on the bottom floor. He's on the 11th floor. Wow. I didn't even know that part of your story. And again, how closely our stories mirror each other. It was similar in Alex's situation and the fact that he was actually with people.
Yeah.
And they were teenagers, not sure what to do. And so I always say Alex is first and foremost dead because of his choices. And so
Right.
I don't blame anybody for his death,
Yes.
but his friends did not call 911.
Right.
Instead, they wasted what we, again, like you guys had to piece the story together. They never told us the truth of what happened that night.
Yeah.
A couple people came forward and told us what had happened. A couple other people had come forward. But the friends that were there, I guess out of fear, they didn't call 911. Yeah. And so had they called 911, very likely his life could have been saved, but instead took them 45 minutes to an hour to get him to the hospital themselves. And by the time they got there, he didn't have a pulse. They were able to revive Alex, but it was too late. So, man, I didn't even know that part of your story, like same thing. So I'm very big on talking about the Good Samaritan law, that you can't get in trouble if you're in good faith calling in a situation like that. And so that education piece, and we're going to get into that in a little bit, but it's so important.
It's so important. It's so huge. Yeah, we're working on that with the university actually right now too. So ironically, and I don't know if you know this part of the story, but I always like to include this because I think it makes it so powerful. 9 months later, so we hadn't obviously gotten into advocacy or anything. We were grieving and I had no idea this is the path our life was going to go. But 9 months later, my husband saw on Facebook another mom in Wisconsin lost her son. And like you, when I reached out to you, I just have certain people I just try to reach out to when I feel like I prompting maybe from God that I need to reach. And I did. And I called this mom or FaceTimed her, Facebooked her, messaged her. We got on the phone within a day and had a 20-minute phone conversation. About halfway through our phone conversation, I asked her about her son, whose name was Caden, 18 years old, where he went to school. He went to school at UW-Milwaukee, same school. He was also a freshman, starting the freshman year, so it was November, and he was also in the same dorm building. Wow. And that stopped his mom, Michelle, and Rick and I, all three of us, we were like, same school, same dorm, same situation with him as well, friends in the room. You know, he had fallen asleep in a beanbag chair, and they were laughing, joking about the sounds he was making, not realizing he was dying, again, from a pill. Told them he had felt yucky, was his word. So very similar story, but the same dorm building. That's what prompted us to start to speak out, because before that, I had not ever even thought about talking. I remember wanting to get Logan up on a billboard, probably just it feels validating to see your child up there, like they matter, which we're running now, even in Phoenix. So I just wanted to add that in there because it's so important. That's what got us really starting to work with the school, with the university, and starting to pressure them, because Logan's death was swept under the rug by the university. And had that not had happened, maybe Cade's life may have been spared. If Cade would have come in freshman year and gotten some education, which they're thankfully now doing, that we're working on with them. They're getting all the incoming freshmen in that school are getting all the education. They're hearing our story. We're actually making a video right now with them. So I think that's the reason we're talking, right? That's the reason why this is so important for, like you said, you don't blame anybody. Of course, Alex made a bad choice. Logan made a bad choice. We never condone that choice ever. And so there is not a person to blame. However, there are circumstances that we can hopefully shape and mold and change for the future generation.
Yeah, to save lives, because thank goodness there is a Narcan that will reverse the effects. And so there is a life-saving drug out there to help. Yep. And so it is preventable.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen Narcan actually work?
I have. Yes.
It is so powerful. So it can be triggering to watch for, I think, a grieving mom. But to see it work is like
powerful.
Yeah. Really. Yeah. It's unbelievable when you see it work.
Let's jump to that. Let's talk about the billboards, because you have one here in Phoenix that I want to go check out after this, and the advocacy work that you guys are doing. Let's jump to that for a minute, because that feels really important.
It is. It's critical. I had no idea, like, our lives would whirlwind into the advocacy. And I always say, I don't know how long we'll do it. We feel a calling until God shows us otherwise. That really started about a year and a half later, 2022, in the summer. We got invited to a DEA conference in Washington, D.C., so a national conference that was inviting about 70 families who had gone through exactly what we had gone through. So we decided to go to the conference. It was an honor to be invited. And through that conference, my eyes were wide open. I was shocked at how many families like us were going through this. To hear the numbers, the staggering numbers of over 100 and some thousand drug-related deaths, 70% of them fentanyl poisonings. It was like Rick and I were like, we have to talk. We've got to do something. So we started Logan Foundation. I was struggling with what to call it. And there's a kind of a story in our little video that talks about the logo that we have, which was Logan's heart in the middle of it, that he had written to me for a card. And being at Valentine's Day, with it being his death, it seemed appropriate to call it Love Logan. Mm-hmm. So we do lots of different things, but the billboards they're a lot of work. A lot of people don't know, like, seeing an image up there, they don't know all the work that goes behind, probably like you too, like the work that goes behind any project. There's a lot of work involved, artwork and creating, and even emotional when you're looking at other kids' pictures all day. It's tough, but I think there's something, and I think I said this before, there is something validating about seeing your child up there. It validates their life. And that is so important for me to be able to give that to other parents, to give them the chance to be able to see their kids up there. We have an ongoing contract with a company in Wisconsin where we do have a live digital billboard all the time. It's always running. And we change the images up. Right now it's freeze out fentanyl. So it's in Wisconsin, so it's cold right now. So freeze out fentanyl, and then we rotate into spring training and baseball time. So that's the strikeout fentanyl that we started last year as well. So again, just love to get the message out. We keep the billboards very simple, very clear, similar to the one you're seeing in Phoenix here. It just says "fake pills kill," because a lot of times what happens, we get a lot of feedback from people, and I think it's good to keep changing things and perfecting as we can. That message needs to be so simple. If I would have been a mom and not have gone through this, and if I would have seen a billboard that said fentanyl or drugs, I would have driven right past it and been like, that's not us, that's them, but not us.
Not my kid.
Correct. Mm-hmm. Because that's the stigma thing I feel like I probably had subconsciously in my head. It wouldn't have been my kid. I didn't do drugs. My son wasn't around it. Why in the world would I ever have a child die from drugs? That's what I would have said if anyone would have told me my future. It would have been like, no, not us. Maybe them, but not us. Mm-hmm. So I think it's really important to use very simple language so that people understand this is an epidemic that anyone can be susceptible to. No one is immune to this.
That is such an important point. I said that actually. I think you saw one of our news stories that we did, and
that's what
and
made
it
me
maybe
reach out
I
to you.
said it. I'm not sure which one because we did a few, but I did talk about how no one's immune.
No.
And being a therapist and like yourself, here I am working in a high school with teens and families struggling with similar things that my son is going through. And I just remember feeling so helpless. Like, how am I helping these families and kids? And I can't even help my own son.
Totally.
And when you reached out to me and you shared that, it's like somebody understood. Like, I felt obviously I should be able to help my kid. It's different when it's your own and it's so personal, right? Like when you're helping other families and people, it's different than when it's in your own personal life and home. But I'm like, I have all these skills and tools and all this knowledge. I feel for families that don't have that and they have kids struggling and navigating the mental health system, right?
Right.
But even I didn't know what to do, and I was in the system. And so it's actually one of the questions I had for you is, can you share what it was like for you grappling with the feeling of, I help families every day, and how can I not fix my own?
Yeah, it still is, I think, there. Definitely. Because we started so early with Logan and he was in 4th grade, therapy, went through multiple therapists. I honestly feel like we couldn't find a therapist that would dig with him. And I'm a therapist that digs. And the death has changed the way I do therapy too. I feel like it's improved. It's improved. And I humbly say this, but I feel like that's my niche. Like I work with families and I dig. These parents need help with their kids, whether it's substances or anything else. I dedicate myself to these families and couples that I work with. But yes, wrestling with that, I was constantly, and I think I was always looking for help in any way. It was like even when he was getting help, I was looking for the next step because I knew deep down he was not okay. I was his biggest advocate. I don't think anyone will ever understand how much work I did for that kid behind the scenes to try to make sure he'd be okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what mom does.
Exactly. Yeah. It's so deeply painful for anybody to walk this journey. But like you said, mothers have different roles in it too.
Right.
And then again, I think just with the profession that we do, just that's who I want to help the most is my son, like before anybody else. And so it's so painful when you watch your kids struggle and you're doing everything you can.
You can't do
and you can't ultimately control them. I had this moment where I had to come to this realization that Alex was his own person. Yes. I couldn't change or fix his situation. And so I had this moment where I had to turn inward and focus on what I could control, what I did, what I said, how I showed up.
Right.
And I knew that he ultimately was going to have to make some of his choices, as painful as that was. I think as parents, we have this false sense of control because we love our kids so much and we want them to be happy, healthy, successful. And when it's not going that way, when they're not okay, when they're not healthy, it destroys us, right? And so we want to be able to just grasp and control and change. Mm-hmm. And I had to come to grips with that Alex was his own person.
Right. And I think it is so painful. And I think every child we deal with that in some way, depending on their struggle or how big or small their struggle is, even if it's just letting go as a mom and letting them fall in normal circumstances, which I think we have more of that kind of going on with our other son, just him growing through being a 22-year-old and letting go as a mom. It's still a navigation of got to let him deal with some of the choices and love him through it. But it deepens it and makes it so much more complicated when you know they're making choices that are destructive, like Alex or Logan.
Yeah.
For sure. And I know with Logan, I always say he didn't open up much about his struggles at all. It was very hidden. He became very manipulative, and we dealt with, I would say, if anyone even listening has dealt with addiction in a home, I didn't know what that looked like. But now as I look back, that was us. And I didn't even know going through it, that was what we were going through. I kept saying, where's my son? He's changed so much. I couldn't understand. And it was because I truly, Lindsay, did not understand addiction. I wasn't an addiction specialist. I had specialized in marriage and family therapy, so I wasn't exposed to addiction personally. It wasn't on my radar. I knew something was wrong, and I knew he was experimenting for sure. That was on my radar. I did not know how bad it was. And that's why when we started the foundation, Rick and I both said, we have to tell the true story. Yes, he died from a pill, but he struggled deeply before that.
Yes.
The pill is what killed him. I believe if fentanyl was not around, he'd still be struggling or still out there, and we'd still be trying to get him help. Fentanyl sadly ends the game. And Rick always says this when we talk to parents, dead kids can't recover. That's why Narcan and the knowledge and all of this is so important to talk about, because once they're gone, they don't have a chance to learn from that mistake. And all kids make mistakes.
Oh, yeah.
They make tons of mistakes. We made mistakes.
Yeah.
Not costly ones that cost us our lives. Thank goodness.
That's the really scary thing too, this point that you bring up that, so my husband and I did some fentanyl testimony in Colorado. That's where we're from. And so we had got connected with a group out there and they were looking at passing a bill. And so we had got involved with this group. And in my testimony, I had talked about how, not saying it's right, but it is normal for teenagers to experiment,
Sure.
right, with drugs and alcohol.
Sure.
And so what's happened is, I think fentanyl and some of these even marijuana being more potent than it's ever been, is robbing kids of that typical teenage experimentation phase, because now we have a deadly drug out there.
Correct.
Right? And kids who are experimenting, and many of them, I've heard so many stories, and I know you know this too, of kids who really didn't have maybe a whole history with substance use. Obviously, they're starting to dabble in things, I think, if they're taking pills, but they take thinking it's a Xanax. And it's a fentanyl pill.
Yep.
And yeah, it's robbing kids of that. And fentanyl. So I always say in Alex's story that fentanyl was what stopped his heart. So that's obviously the very dangerous, deadly thing, but we lost him to marijuana first. I always say that.
I think that's one of the reasons too, when we compared stories, that was a big one for us too, that I had mentioned. Logan, same thing.
Yeah, because we underestimate marijuana. Like, it's easy in our society to hear people often say, oh, I'd rather my kid do that than drink, or, oh, it's all natural. We have this kind of perception with marijuana. And again, time and place develop. If it's an adult person, I'm not here to say what's right or wrong, but when you have a kid with a developing brain, drugs are super harmful. And then marijuana today is way different than what we had growing up. So I actually went to a youth marijuana prevention conference a couple summers ago, and they talked about the potency back when we were growing up was 3 to 5% concentrated with THC. And now they're saying with the dabs and the pens that kids are using, it's upwards of 99.4%. And I saw that is what happened in our story, as we watched Alex completely turn into a kid we didn't even recognize. We didn't even recognize our own kid. And it happened within a year's time frame, and it all started with marijuana. Yeah. So I think highlighting that is important too, because nobody starts out on fentanyl.
No, and I tell kids all the time, and even parents, like, no one starts any of that typically without drinking too. Remember, now we've got alcohol usually comes before, typically, if you're going to look at the hierarchy scale, right? A lot of kids start dabbling in alcohol first, and a lot of times they're not completely sober when they decide to try marijuana or a pill. So there is a ladder of succession there, absolutely. And I would say Logan's story is very similar. The only difference, or kind of little add-in that we have that we know, is he did have a knee surgery at age 14. He had a tumor growing like to the side in his knee, complaining about pain, and actually thought it was cancer at first, and it was scary, but it was benign and it just needed to be removed. But the doctor sent him home with oxycodone. And about 3 days post-surgery, Rick and I looked at him in the chair and had a private conversation, and we decided to take that away rapidly, because I saw him and it just didn't look like it was affecting him. So we took it away and got him on Tylenol, ibuprofen. Ironically, in the police report now, again, post his death, there's a text from him to somebody else saying he had been experimenting with marijuana and pills for 5 years. 5 years puts us back to 14 years old, which is the mark of his surgery. And again, I knew something had changed. I didn't know what he was doing. But it was tumultuous for a few years there when, like you said, with Alex changing, Logan changed into a different person. And I now know that wasn't Logan. That was the drugs affecting his brain, and he became a different person because the drugs do that. They do, sadly. And when you have a kid whose brain is not developed yet and they are experimenting, they're 80% more likely to have an addiction. You add in genetics or any of the other statistics that influence these kids, and they're so moldable at that age. The brains are so, impressionable.
Yes.
So I do believe that there was definitely damage done from marijuana as well.
Yeah. The developing brain thing is huge. I think the stat, I read a stat, if people wait till 21 to introduce substances,
it's a huge stat. It goes
like
down
90% or something or less. Yeah. It's, likely to not develop an addiction.
Correct.
I think it was like 90%.
Yes. It's huge. Yep.
Yeah. Gosh, what do you wish parents knew about all of this? Not just fentanyl, but just this journey. What do you want parents to know, even in breaking the stigma? What is your goal in this? Yeah. What do you wish parents knew about this journey and all that comes with it?
I could think of so many things, but one of the things that pops out in my mind when you ask that, Lindsay, is I like to tell parents, pills are so normalized, right? We all grow up in homes, and as parents can say, we've probably taken a Tylenol or some kind of medication in front of our children, and our children are taking medications. Pills are not scary at all to adults or kids, really. If you look at a pill, it looks innocent. It's not like there's needles and powder and all the scary stuff going around. That's that stigma, right? You hear like drugs, and I think instantly in a person's mind, for sure me at some point, it was thinking, oh, dark street, alley, drug exchange, all of that kind of stuff. And I like to take that picture and change it for parents and for kids, because that's not what's happening. Again, I think I've said fentanyl has changed the whole trajectory of what that looks like. This can touch anybody, right? We're sitting here talking about these two beautiful boys who've been lost, and they were both great kids.
Yeah.
Beautiful
who
souls.
Came, same like you, me and my husband, I don't even drink, came from homes where there wasn't substance use and that sort of thing. And yeah.
And I do believe with Logan specifically that, and maybe with Alex too, with Logan growing up in a home with a lot of faith-based teaching, and we went to youth group and church. And so I think the inner struggle was even bigger because he had guilt, right? And if you're brought up in a home that has some of those extra things, the likelihood of that guilt and that conflict internally can be greater and deeper than someone who maybe doesn't have that extra guilt. And it's nothing he ever talked about, but I definitely believe that was the case for him. There was deep guilt, and what he was doing didn't match what he was taught. So there was this inner battle, right? And I think that's what pushed him away. And that's usually with substance use anyway, is people pull away from anyone who's going to hold them accountable. And he knew we would definitely hold him accountable, which is why he pulled from us. Yeah. Because we would do anything to stop him from doing anything because of exactly what happened. Right. So, I would tell parents again that the normalizing of pills is really important to realize that we need to make sure kids are understanding that a pill can kill, and it needs to be a prescription pill, from a doctor. And even then, you still need to be super careful. I mean, look at what happened to Logan and millions of other people who've died. It starts with a prescription. So just really making sure those things are just dealt with very carefully. When I talk to parents, I'll ask them, would you ever put a loaded gun on your kitchen counter? And the parents are like, obviously not. And I'll say, if you don't have medication locked up, cough medicines, anything like that, you have a loaded gun on your counter. I do believe that. And those are things I didn't know. Those are things I didn't understand and I didn't know. Yeah. We had finally locked things up after he came back from treatment, but he was well into his use by then and experimenting. Yeah. So that's a big one. Just breaking that stigma, I think that is the most important thing, because I see it affected on so many levels. It's affected our family, our small family. It's broken up our family deeply. The death has, I think, and I believe a lot of it's just the stigma. We have been blamed by some of the family members, sadly, who just didn't ask questions and didn't seek to understand or believed some of the things Logan was saying that weren't accurate. So it just really tears apart so many different things.
The ripple effect. I talk about this. It's huge.
It's huge. Nothing's really the same.
No, I talked about this in my first podcast episode that, and I can't remember the number, like 60 million, or maybe it's like 45 million people struggle with addiction. And when you consider its impacts, though, are far reaching beyond that one individual. And so when you consider it doubling that, or it's even more than doubling, we're talking well over 100 million people affected by these struggles.
Huge.
And so it is. And that ripple effect. And then what you're saying with the grief piece of it, it can tear families apart. Yeah. Grief is, the emotions that come with grief is so much. Right. And some people don't know what to do with those emotions. Right?
Yeah, I think I did a study or a little Google search and studied a little bit on marriages after loss of a child. And the statistics are staggering on marriages that don't survive, like 80 some percent. It was really high. And so I'm grateful that Rick and I continue. We've gotten closer, if anything. Yeah. Logan, he put our marriage to the test for sure. Any addiction types of stuff. Well, you're parenting different and that kind of thing.
For sure. Stress, high stress.
Huge. Yeah. What do? One wants to do this. One wants to, it's hard anyway.
Yeah. I'm glad you bring that piece up. Me and my husband were also talking about that same thing. I did read that same stat of the amount of marriages that break after this sort of tragedy and loss. And same thing. It actually brought me and my husband closer. And I think what we've done is we've honored each other's grief journey uniquely. I always say grief is like a thumbprint. It's unique to every single individual. And we've been able to honor each other and just walk alongside each other however we needed to grieve. That's really similar. It's huge. Yeah. So I want to go to your faith. You wrote that you trust that God has a plan even through this pain. There's a song by Toby Mac, a Christian artist. Okay,
saw him in concert.
You did?
Like 3 weeks ago before I got into Arizona. Saw him in Chicago.
Oh, wow.
Probably for like the 10th time, maybe more. We see him so much. So the song was played at the funeral.
Okay, so his song 21 Years?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I was actually going to bring Toby up into this because I think he also helps us break that stigma, right? Here's a well-known, probably the most well-known Christian pop rap artist of all time, really. And he had his oldest son, Truett, die by fentanyl in November, the year before Logan passed. And so, I remember the day I found out. I texted the article to Logan and to Caden on a group text because they, of course, had seen him in concert with us multiple times. And so I think I was deep down, probably subconsciously hoping it would hit Logan. Yeah. Wake him up a little bit, I think. And I'm not sure where I was going with that, but to Toby with the stigma, like it can hit
anybody,
anyone. Yeah. His new album came out today and multiple songs on there about his loss and the pain. There's a song on there, I believe, that he wrote for one of his surviving sons, which is a whole nother piece. These siblings left behind that are deeply grieving and navigating the loss of a sibling is so overlooked and huge.
Yes. Like we're saying, and impacting the whole family unit, same thing. Our 7-year-old daughter was very close to Alex. They were 10 years apart. And it does. We talk about the parents and that struggle, but the sibling, yes, that's huge. They're deeply impacted as well. Yeah. And I think we need to honor and acknowledge that. Yeah. So his song, 21 Years, how he ends it, the last lyrics, it just hits me so hard every time. He says, 21 years makes a man full grown. 21 years, what a beautiful loan. 21 years, I love everyone. Thank you, Lord, for my beautiful son. Yeah. When you hear those words, what does that mean to you? And how does your faith play a role? How has it played a role in your healing?
I bring this whole story back faith-based to the day he died, right? I have a verse tattooed on my arm. Logan loved tattoos. I wasn't crazy about them. Now he's probably smiling down on me. Isaiah 43:1, which is a verse that talks about God choosing his called upon people, kids, whatever. And it talks about how he redeems. And he says, you are chosen, you are mine. And so I believe, I truly do, and this is, at the end of the day, my saving grace. I believe that Logan was taken on Valentine's Day because God chose him. He loved him that much. And I just feel like that is the cornerstone of my faith in this story. It's just so important to not let something like this get you angry or tear you up in that way. The sadness is okay. God doesn't promise us an easy walk, but he does promise that he'll be with us. And I think that's how I get through. So just the 21 Years song was played at Logan's funeral. So I know the song very well. I resonate with a lot of the words. And I really, truly don't know what to say other than if you don't have faith, I don't know how you get through this. Truly. At our deepest moments, I know I'll see him again.
Yeah. My faith journey, I had a relationship with God growing up, veered away from the church. So Alex growing up, we didn't talk about God in our home. We didn't go to church. So Alex actually did not grow up around that. He was not a believer. He didn't know God, Jesus. God actually reached out to me in a very deep and profound way right before Alex passed away, right before 2 weeks. Wow. So my faith journey actually, like getting back into faith and a relationship with God, began 2 weeks before Alex passed away. Yeah. And I genuinely believe that God knew we were about to face the most difficult chapter in our journey so far. And it has been the cornerstone of my saving grace. It has changed the trajectory of my entire grief. And so you say, I don't know how people get through it. I agree. Faith has been huge. What it did for me is it ripped my heart wide open.
Right.
And wide open to uncover the greater purpose. And it made me realize that there is something far beyond our human comprehension to all our lives and stories. And that purpose to pain idea, God has really revealed that to me and shown that to me. And I genuinely believe that I wouldn't be sitting in this chair right now, doing the work I'm doing, being able to continue to return to the battlefield every single day with families and people. Currently, I work at a suicide treatment center. I sit with people every day who want to die. Yeah. It's a darkness, but I know God's love and light. Yes. And that's what I'm trying to bring to the world and to people. I want them to feel that love. I want them to feel that light. That's how we turn the tide. And so the only way I'm able to continue this work, I feel like, is because I walked the journey I walked. And I also know what it's like to be in the deepest depths of my own darkness. And I think once you can, like you said, you do your work a little differently, once you
can relate to the pain
on a whole different level, right? It changes you completely.
I can't not.
I always say there was life before Alex passed away and there's life after, and it is not the same. The way I see the world, the way I see people, I just love people.
Deeper.
Mm-hmm.
I do too.
Yeah. And I want them to feel that love and light because,
And I think that's why so many relationships change. If you look at your life before and life after, of course, there's some threads that are going to be pulled through both, but there's also so many changes in relationships and how your life goes, and the people you lean on could look different as well, or some of them. And for sure in my life, that a lot of that has changed. And I think that's because we change, right? We're not the same. So there is probably grieving for other people in our lives who've lost the person we were before. But again, God promises, that he will walk through these things with us. And faith, I think, can look different for all different people. I definitely stay very, reserved as far as judging other people. I think that can look different for anybody. And I support all of that. I think that's super important. And for me and for my husband, Rick, and for our other son, Caden, it's even today, my son has an interview and can you pray for me, Mom? And Logan would also ask us to pray often. So I just think that prayer is really powerful. And there's days where I forget to pray. I know I prayed on my way here, though, asking God for strength with my words. And so he cares about those little things.
Yeah.
When he cares about our left behind siblings and your kids and your husband and families, and cares about all of it. Yeah. One thing that really helps me, and this is the source of strength from my husband, is that it might sound actually dim or dark, but he has said to me many times, Erin, death is a part of life. And in some bizarre way, that helps me. It's almost like, why would that help? But it comforts me to be reminded that this wasn't an accident. I do believe that there are people who are meant to be here for longer periods of time, and there are people whose lives end short. And that's not for us to choose.
I do too.
That's not our decision.
Yeah. That goes back to that. Thank you. What a beautiful loan.
Yes.
That he talks about.
Yes.
We're loaned.
Yes.
We're not
No,
just,
not our children.
Yeah.
We were chosen as the parents on earth.
Yeah. It goes back to that.
Yeah.
That lyric. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
That is so powerful. I agree. Like you, I think wherever your faith is, it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's just having that faith in something greater than yourself. I always say, even if it's divine love, like just recognizing that there's a higher force at work in all this. And it is huge, I think, to healing in any journey. Yeah. So Logan, can the camera see Logan right there? Oh my goodness. Like such a handsome boy.
Beautiful boy.
Yes.
Never believed me when I told him that.
Bro, isn't
he always said he wanted to be a model, right? So he modeled for Kohl's when he was little. I would bring him in, and he ended up not getting future jobs because he would get off the stage when he was little and come running to me all the time. So he has a Kohl's ad, but sadly, in a very strange way, he's modeling in a very different way than I think we ever would have realized. But his face captures attention, and just like you're beautiful. You're beautiful, Alex, of course, but
yeah, it does, because he's just such a handsome kid. Yeah. If Logan could see all the work that you've done in his name, what do you think he would say?
I'm proud of you, Mom. Yeah.
Anything else that you want the listeners to know today? Anything else that God is putting on your heart?
I think just making sure that we continue to go back to siblings. I think that's so important. So our foundation established a national day, a national siblings grieving day who've been affected specifically for fentanyl. And that came about over the last year when my son Caden said how hard National Siblings Day is for him, which is April 10th. Every year. Last year, he said he just got sad looking at Instagram and having friends of his that don't understand, post pictures and so forth. And so I started thinking, what can we do for this kid? I can't only do so much to help him in his grieving journey. He's wrestling with the loss of his only brother, his only sibling. And so we established his National Day. So it is in the National Archives. The DEA is backing the day. And I had a lot of grand plans for the day that probably won't end up being, but I just think it's important to at least mention how important that is, that these kids left behind need something to hold on to. And I think that day is going to be really important for them. And again, even if it isn't publicized all over, I just think that each one of us in our individual stories need to make sure that we continue to bring attention to those kids that are left behind. And again, I think listening to Toby's song that came out today, I can't remember the name of it, but I listened to it like 3 times before this morning.
I'm gonna have to check it out.
And he dedicated it to his son, Gabe. And if you listen to the words, I already sent it to Caden this morning. I said, listen to the words. It's brother to brother. And I think it's just really important that we just support these kids. They think of things that we don't think of. For instance, what do I do when mom and dad are gone? Who do I have left once my parents are gone? If in order death occurs for the rest of our family, we will be gone before our son. And he will have many more years to deal with this than we do. And those things didn't go through my mind until I started to read books and really understand the depth of sibling grief. Even if it's not fentanyl, just sibling grief alone is it's huge. And then the one other thought I like to mention about siblings is anyone that you've got 3 others, right? 2 girls and another boy,
yeah, 2,
right?
Yep.
I'm right? Okay. Anyone that your 3 meet from here on out will only know them with the siblings left in your family. Yeah. They will not know them with Alex. And so for them to picture Alex will be harder. For them to understand that the loss is harder, right? So anyone Caden meets from here on out, and doesn't know him with a brother. So they won't understand the loss because they didn't know him with the brother, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And I read that someplace in a book when I was reading about sibling grief. And I just, again, it might be a little bit of what we deal with, but I believe that as adults, we do have some people that stick with us through this. And like a lot of the friends that have remained in my life as support knew Logan or knew me with Logan. And so I don't have to struggle with that, right? And like most new people for me are people like you, like other families who are going through this. But these kids have a very different experience with that.
Wow.
And that's just not something that I don't think our natural human thought process thinks through.
I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
I actually never did. Like I said, I have obviously seen and felt the impacts it's had on his siblings. And like I said, my 7-year-old daughter, especially just at Christmas, she was doing a shrine for him and she's created a whole area in her room. 4 years later, in some ways it gets harder as time goes on. Just different challenges. Yes. I think the further, like what you're talking about with the siblings, the further you get away from the passing, the harder it feels because they'll never be beyond 17. He'll never be beyond 19. And your life just keeps moving. And the further you get from it, the more distant you feel, right? And so there's these unique challenges that come with grief, but I never thought of it that way with the siblings. And I think it reminds me of when I get asked the question, how many kids do you have? It's a really hard one. I did not even realize it until after Alex passed away. I had this moment of, well, what do I say? And so what I have come to is it's always 4. It will always be 4 kids, absolutely. Right? But sometimes you say that and then they ask, oh, how old are they? And then it's, oh, our oldest passed away. And sometimes it depends on the situation. I don't always want to get into that. Depends. Correct. It depends on where we're at in the situation. And I just didn't think about those little complexities of grief that you don't think about. So it's the same thing with what you're describing with the siblings. Yeah, that the people they meet now are not going to know them with that sibling. Yeah.
There's a huge identity loss to it.
Yes.
There's a huge identity loss. There's some for us, but it's bigger for a child. It's bigger for a child. And I feel that's important to talk about because it's made me a better mom. Yeah.
I'm so glad you're honoring that. Our youngest was 2.5 when Alex passed away. So she will never have actual memories, but it's like she picked up on it. She picked up on the grief in the home. And then obviously we talk about him so much, so she knows him through that.
Right.
And so just now, even at 6 years old, we have her in therapy and she's working through stuff with Alex that she didn't even, won't have actual memories, but she is also affected. So we even underestimate the little ones, like 2 years old. She was young when her sibling passed, but she is even still affected.
Right.
And her brain now, she's asking questions, trying to understand how he passed away. Yeah. And so it even affects little ones. We don't think it would, because they don't have those actual memories. But of course, because his memory is very much alive in our home.
And too, young kids are so impressionable, right? Yeah. So they can feel grief through their parents, through their older siblings. So she could be feeling grief just because she's watching the process. Exactly. So it's magnified it for her and they pick up so much. They're so impressionable. So it could be very deep for her in a very real way. Yeah. So it's good that she's working through it and that you're talking about it and that you don't just dismiss, oh, she was 2.5. So no, she's watching your whole family go through this and she's part of that process. So that's super important. So yeah, I just think that was an important piece to mention because again, I don't hear a lot of people talking about siblings. Yeah. And it was an important part of our healing. We're still working on our relationship with my other son, but he's got a lot of healing to do as we do. You know that it's going to be an ongoing journey, but it's definitely helped us find deeper compassion in different ways for things he struggles with that we might just not understand.
Yeah. So what do you want Caden to know?
That he will always have us, no matter what. I don't care what mistake he makes. I was probably that mom with Logan that, I was so disappointed in choices. But now it's like, if you mess up, call me. I'll be there.
I feel that so deeply. So much love to you, Erin. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story.